Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Robert Carson, presenting the topic, Information Security Management Programs, Changing the Paradigm on Implementation and Management.
All right. So, intro, my background, I was a Marine Corps infantry officer in a former life, but basically the last 12 years I've been putting in cybersecurity programs for companies I worked at, as well as for other customers. ISO, SOC 2, FedRAMP, all the fun things. And worked with a lot of companies and seen a lot of challenges. So part of this talk is just really just sharing lessons learned and things that I've seen go right and go wrong. Because any advice I offer is probably because I screwed it up, not because I'm some brilliant person. And I'm the former CSO for Las Vegas B-Side, so if any of you ever come out to Vegas for DEF CON or Hacker Summer Camp, hit me up. We'll have a beer. There we go. And disclaimer, hey, what we're talking about, you gotta do your own research, what's best for you. What works for a 6-person company may not work for a 1,000-person company, so depending on your organization, you need to think about how you want to apply it, stuff like that, and I'm happy to discuss afterwards about anything. The other thing is, if I talk about any name brand software, it all sucks. Some sucks less than others. I'm not endorsing any of it. Want to be clear. Because it's software. Cool. And so here's the challenge, right? So I guess from the audience here, and it's hard to see with this light, how many of you are in cybersecurity, like running cybersecurity programs, security managers? A few of you? Okay, cool. For those that raise your hands, keep your hands up. How many of you have all the budget you need? You can put your hands down if you have all the budget you need. Okay. Oh, yeah? And all the people? Where do you actually work? That sounds like a fantasy land. But that's the thing, right? For the most part, most of us don't have the budget. We don't have the time. You don't ever have the resources you need. So that's what we're going to kind of walk through. Like, that's the challenge. Like, how do we actually do things correctly? And how do we integrate with the business? How can you distribute that work? Because you're never going to have the staff that you need. So what's my solution? We got to break the governance model. We got to essentially control it, inject yourself in every single process, be part of everything. We need to get rid of that. Like, that's not working, right? It's spreading you too thin. You wind up bald, looking like me, right? Like you're gonna stressed out because you're just, I got to be everywhere. Oh, these people are idiots. Like that's not going to scale, right? So we got to leverage monitoring the business is fruitless activities. You're just chasing your tail. And then, you guys ever heard the term of a BISO? So a business information security officer. So think of that as representatives or someone has that collateral duty, that extra duty inside a different line of business. So in dev, you might have an AppSec engineer, right? They handle the priority problems or issues for vulnerabilities. Inside of finance, they help with the third-party onboarding, things like that, or in HR. In different lines of business, you have people that are actually paying attention to it. So, and here are some of the questions I hope we can answer. How can we distribute accountability of the program? What can we do to automate it? And how do we stop wasting time? All right. So let's talk about reality. If you look at history, any empire that has lasted a couple thousand years, they all had a distributed model. They had decentralized control. The ancient Egyptians, they had the pharaoh, but they also had the Egyptian priests, for lack of a better term, that were out there, and they're the ones that actually did the governing at the local level. Same with Macedonia, Persian Empire, name the empire, the ones that lasted. That's how they worked really well. You look at the former USSR. They had centralized planning economy, things like that. They didn't work out so well, right? Some of you might recognize that. And even with the U.S., right? Like if you look at centralized control, trying to control everything, trying to control that fiefdom, doesn't work so well, especially the further away you are from the risk. So you look at the Vietnam War. In the U.S., there was a joke that a guy couldn't even use the restroom without approval from Washington. Like when you have that type of centralized control, it leads to poor effects. So if we look at history, we can tell that centralized control does not work very well. But distributed model does. That's where we want to push that information out. We want to give people autonomy to be able to work as they need. Is it really hot in here, or is it me? These lights are hot. All right. So let's talk about two hopeful CISOs. So let's talk about Rob, and we'll call the other one Chris. Okay. So Rob and Chris, they both want to be CISOs. They're at different organizations, and they're companies. They make software. They have a couple government regulations. They've got to put in ISO, SOC 2, FedRAMP, something like that. Maybe some GDPR, whatever it is, right? You know, this is a Euro crowd. They've got to put those things in. So what happens when the company starts is they insert themselves in every single process. They're part of third-party risk management. They're part of onboarding. They're part of everything. All change management meetings, everything. Well, what happens over time is they get spread thin. They become so central to the company that, you know, it's like, oh, well, what would we do without them? Like, they scare everyone. The fear, uncertainty disorder. Like, how do we do this? Well, as time goes on, what's going to happen is that organization grows. They start bringing in new people. New people go, hey, this is not how it has to be. They bring in the consultant. The consultant, we'll call that consultant Brad. They come in, and guess what happens? Brad's going to go, you guys need to listen. You need to distribute your stuff. One guy's going to hold on to his fiefdom. Call that, again, we'll go back to Sean and Rob. Rob's going to be smart. Rob's going to listen to the consultant and stop and let go of things that don't matter. And that's kind of the point, because what will happen is the guy who holds on to everything and has to be part of everything gets burnt out and usually gets replaced. That's what happens, because they're so focused on being part of every single thing that they can't get past themselves and realize they need to create these autonomous units, provide that guidance, get them where they need to be, but they don't actually have to be part of everything. You know, and I say this from somebody who's been guilty of it. I've done it myself. So, and why? Why should we not be part of every single thing? You're not the risk owner. At the end of the day, the risk owner needs to sign off on the risk. Why are you trying to worry about something that's not your problem? If they don't care, you don't care. To be honest. So we got to distribute that risk. We got to understand the accountability is a big piece of that. It's not make the business units accountable. And if they're not doing it, then they're not doing it. And that's the result on them. It's not on you. Provide the guidance, provide that process, make sure it's effective and efficient and they understand it. But you don't necessarily have to be a part of everything. Stop trying to control what you can't. All right? I got a lot of memes in here, by the way, so I don't know if they work with a Lithuanian audience. All right, so let's talk about a better way. So where can we integrate? Well, HR is easy. So background checks. Think about that. You join an organization, and if you want a copy of this afterwards, just hit me up on email. I'll send it to you. Background checks, that's easy, right? A lot of times HR handles that anyhow. They do the screening. They make sure that stuff happens. Finance and accounting. So what if you had a process in place where, unless it was, let's call it a level 3 software, some very specific type of data, and they didn't have the right certifications, that SaaS, that software you're buying wasn't very secure, that's the only time you're involved. Otherwise, the organization wants to do it. They fill out the questionnaire, they do the risk assessment themselves, and then all finance does is make sure that it was done. Do you have to be a part of it if they did that stuff? Right? If they actually know what they're doing, if you train them, if you have that BISO who has a little bit of training, understand what's going on, they can do that risk assessment for you. You don't have to be a part of it. Get yourself out of that process, because now you're not the one stopping the company from buying things. You're out of that process. You're not slowing anybody down. SDLC, we'll talk about that in a little more detail. And there's people here at this conference that they're probably pretty amazing at it. And then legal, right? Contractual requirements. We've got to make sure that we're covering those things. But you know what I used to do is I'd provide legal. Here's a list of stuff we can agree to, and if it's something different, call me. Right? Get yourself out of the process. Provide the guidance. Provide structure for people to execute. but you don't actually have to be part of every single process because you don't scale. Let the business be autonomous. Let's get out of the way of ourselves. So how do we structure that stuff, right? So distributing your team. Instead of having a big cybersecurity team, what if you just help write job descriptions for different departments that included a business information security officer or that duty? So your AppSec engineer, they sit under there, maybe on this site reliability team, same kind of thing. And the CSO's over to the side helping out. Any questions so far or debate? This is a lively audience. Let's get excited. What you got, big man? There absolutely are. So I've heard this term since 2013 or so. I know they had it at Citibank, and then there's a Netflix documentary where the CISO for Netflix talks about it as well. No. So you still have, actually, can I get that pointer thing that you offered me that I told you I didn't need? Maybe it's, oh, never mind. Oh, I don't have, that's fine. So what I have over here is CISOs over there, but they're not part of that chain of command, right? This is an autonomous unit. So the CISO is there, they're providing that guidance. They're maybe meeting with the BSOs on a monthly basis, making sure the processes are functioning, they know what's going on. So the CISO still has a role. But instead of having a massive team, maybe you have one senior security analyst and an internal auditor, but all those other duties that security teams do that are burnt out trying to do everything, they're pushed to the actual business. And so, question though? All right. Any other questions while we're going here? I'd like to slow myself down for a second, or I'll just keep rambling. All right. So distribute that team. You got to recruit for your team, right? I don't know if anyone's even old enough to recognize that movie. But you got to recruit, right? You got to help be part of those organizations, their hiring process, looking for somebody that's the AppSec engineer, right? Or who's someone who's a nerd, who wants to go to DEF CON. Maybe that's part of their package. They go with you to Hacker Summer Camp every year, or they go to CyberWise Con, like this conference right here, right? Like they go to something, they get some extra training, they're part of it, so they can be part of that process. And you can find somebody from HR, from finance, from accounting. Like, it doesn't always, the AppSec guys, it's pretty easy. Sometimes getting them to leave their basement is a little bit hard, but I don't know if you have that in Lithuania, but in America, most of our engineers live with their mom's basement, but maybe not here. So recruit, put in those BSOs, right? Like having those representatives inside those departments, they can run that process for you. They have a day job, and part of their day job is to do that, but they're coding or they're consulting, but they also make sure that process functions inside of there. So you're distributing that model out, and you're not in the way of them doing things. And then you use that internal auditor to check on things. So, and I have a talk tomorrow where I get a lot more into guerrilla warfare, talk about insurgent tactics. But if you look at guerrilla warfare and distributed models, right, that's what guerrilla warfare is. It's distributed tactics where people are operating at small unit level. You get the political wing. That's essentially your BSO, okay? And the military wing, that's your senior security analyst and your internal audit. So those are functions that maybe you are keeping underneath your security team, but you're pushing that BSO out. They got a dotted line to you where you can talk to them and educate them, but they're part of that business process that's already functioning. And this way you're not in the way. You're not stopping. You're not the CI no, right? Because we all have been guilty. No one wants that title. This is how we get around it. So that's my time check. I don't want to get in trouble. All right, cool. All right. So third-party management for SaaS applications. So here's one way to look at it, right? So there's tools out there. There's SaaS security posture management. There's cloud security posture management. There's all sorts of tools. But the idea, whether it's a tool or it's an actual just a system, here's how you can do it, right? So the system owner, they're responsible for it. They give you the stuff. You set it up in the system, but the alerts go to the PSO, and then they're handled by the system owner. So if they're not doing their access reviews or their access is inappropriate, it doesn't even touch you. It just goes straight to the system owner and make them accountable for what's going on. Why do you have to be chasing them down? Is that really your role? Or is your role to make sure they're educated and make the best decision they can? Because at the end of the day, you know, you can cry all you want and say what you want, but the business is going to win. So let the business prioritize. And it's their choice. Because otherwise, a lot of times what happens is you're almost putting yourself as becoming the scapegoat, where you feel that responsibility, like, man, well, if we get hacked, I'm in trouble. Like, it's going to be my fault. No, it's not. It's not going to be your fault because you're not accountable for doing this. You alerted them. You made sure the process was in place. It was functional. They have a responsibility, and let's put that responsibility back on them. Same thing, cloud security posture management. Those tools work great. I'm not recommending one in particular. They work for what they're good for, but again, putting that stuff in place. What tools can you use? And we're going to talk about GRC tools for a second here as well. So this one's near and dear to my heart. But these are things that, like, you can validate the compliant requirement without actually, we don't have to pull unique evidence. You don't have to go to these different, to IT, stuff like that. Like, how do we get this information into our systems? So, what in the world? Okay. Sorry, I thought someone edited my slide. All right, what are GRC tools good for? So what I do for a living, obviously, is the arts and crafts of cybersecurity. So I deal with GRC tools all the time. And the marketing around them is amazing. They will tell you that they're going to help you grow hair, help you get girls. I'm going to lose weight. It's going to be awesome. They don't do all that. What they are good for are these things. And one of the first things I would look at if I have a GRC tool is I'm looking for a two-way connection into dev or into any ticketing systems that the other parts of the business use. Because they're not going to go into your GRC tool to do anything. The other parts of the business aren't. What you want is you want to be able to create something where it creates the ticket in their queue in the system they already use. That's a big piece. So these are ways to do it. They're good for collecting evidence. I had a customer who hired us to help them with ISO, and they were working on SOC 2. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. It's more of a US regulation. They said they're going to do SOC 2 on their own. They used the magical GRC tool. They passed ISO, no problem. They failed SOC 2, which they shouldn't have, but they did because they believed in the magical hype. So remember, when you get these tools, you still have to run the program. You still have to do things. The other thing is making sure you define the process. You shouldn't be buying tools that tell you how you're going to do it. You should be able to there should be enough customability, whatever that word is, to be able to figure out what the actual best way to do it is. And they're great for evidence collection. But the other part is, like, what if you're collecting the evidence before you go out there and start collecting all this evidence? You're pushing out your BSO, you're doing your paradigm shift. You're going, okay, I'm just going to do this stuff. How are you going to act on it, right? If you're just collecting evidence to know your program's a failure, maybe that's not the best prioritization. Let's prioritize the evidence where we can act on it. Like, figure out what you're going to do when something goes wrong. That's the other piece I see that a lot of cybersecurity programs They start with, they focus on the controls, right? They are sitting there. This is so much better over here. We should move that stand. Jeez. They focus on the controls, but they forget about the framework. So when you roll out a process, you need to think about, how are you actually going to, what are you going to do to audit it? How are you going to check on it? What is the efficacy of that process? What are your metrics around it, as opposed to just sitting there and rolling out controls, right? Because you need to have a plan to deal with the actual, when it breaks, because it's going to, right? Is it education? Is it retraining? Are we going to automate something? What are we going to do? But having that process in place before you roll out actual controls is a lot more important. That's why, personally, I'm a big fan of ISO 27001, because it gives you a better framework on how to run a program, as opposed to some of the more control-based standards. All right. Any questions so far? Anything else? Man, it's a lively group. You guys sure you're not from Wisconsin, like in the U.S.? What's that? Oh shit! Look at that. Where do you get budget? Oh, this is sweet. Where do you get budget for BSOs? So you don't. So the way that works is they're already either you were going to hire an AppSec person or your dev is going to hire another developer. It's just part of that person's collateral duty. So you work with dev and leadership to make that part of their job description. Does that make sense? And can you suggest concrete enterprise GRCs besides Logic Gate? Yeah. Enterprise level? So I'm a fan of Hyperproof. Hyperproof is more customizable, does allows you to create that program based on what the actual organization does. There are, what's it called? What's that big one that like you need like 3 admins to run? What's that? No, it's worse than that, man. Way worse. Uh, like, what is this? It'll come to me, but I guess, well, I wish if that anonymous person could tell me what they mean by enterprise, because like that's the whole joke. Are you talking 30,000 people or 1,000 people? Like small enterprise, large enterprise, publicly traded? But yeah, I like Hyperproof. I've used Drata, Vanta. Drata's fine, but it's the problem I have is that I like programs that allow me to make sure that we are tailoring our processes around what the company actually does and not making our processes tailored to what the technology will allow, if that makes sense. And with Hyperproof, I get, at least when I work with our customers, I get more, I get like 5 frameworks because most customers have to deal with more than one standard. And so you need to be able to measure how you're running one program with multiple frameworks. Right? Because most of the time you're not dealing with just SOC 2 or ISO 27001. You've got GDPR, you've got HIPAA, you've got PCI, you've got whatever it is. I'm sure there's a Lithuanian one. I don't know what it's called, but I'm sure there's something. It's coming. You know, so you need to have one that lets you do multiple frameworks. But yeah, it's a good question though. What I don't like about some of the tools is you can't use them. Let's say your password policy is 12 characters and you change it every 62 days. Okay. I'm not here to judge. As long as you got MFA, I really don't care what your password policy is, to be honest. But you should be able to have the technology alert on the software or systems that are not set up to meet what your password policy is. Not have to change the systems to meet what the GRC tool says your password policy should be. Because a lot of times you kind of you have to wind up turning it off otherwise. All right. Should BSOs have the same technical qualifications as the CISO? No. The BSOs should be good at what they're actually good at. So like your BSO that's working in dev, right? They should be good at code. They should maybe go to some secure code training. Like we did at a company, my business partner and I, where we worked together, we taught a secure coding class. And then we found a few developers that were actually using it, and they were using the free version of Burp Suite. What did we do? We went and bought them we used our budget to go buy them the full version of Burp Suite. We opened up the, we used Tenable Nessus, the scanning solution, and we opened that up to them so they could run all the scans they wanted and check it and verify it and make sure it was remediated, so that we empowered them to just get stuff done. They weren't waiting on us at all. They were able to operate much more effectively. You know, and one way, if let's say dev doesn't want to cooperate, one way to do that is just start letting your customers pen test you. All of a sudden, they'll want to work with you on the front end as opposed to dealing with that customer at the end when you have the vulnerability, and it's much harder to fix. Yeah, and that's DLC, right? So, is that all the questions we got for right now? Perfect. All right. So system owner, they're responsible for ensuring the testing, security, advise on the risks, test the efficacy through third-party web apps. So you empower that process, and you still use your audits and things to make sure that the process is effective. If you were looking at, third-party SaaS, third-party software and services that the company's procuring, you do your audits and validate, are we following the process correctly? But it makes sure that marketing, when they're hiring somebody to do graphic design, some contractor, you're not wasting time with something that doesn't really matter. Like, who cares, right? Whereas, like, if it's something super important, it's got the customer's critical data in it, absolutely. Then you want to make sure that they're doing more due diligence there, right? You're not guarding nuclear codes, so, or at least not everybody in the organization is. So making sure the risk makes sense. Implementing that process, right? So I know there's a lot of DevOps talks. This is from a compliance perspective because, we're the new sexy. Just don't tell everybody. But this process right here, you're doing the vulnerabilities. All of this can be completely automated. You don't have to do change meetings. You don't have to do peer review. And you can still be compliant. Change management does not mean change meeting. It's a fun fact, right? If you've got secure coding, like a Sonar Cube or a Veracode, something like that, that's actually integrated in the pipeline, and they're not allowed to override it, hey, or if they want to prove it's a false positive, at least then it requires peer review. You can run this. They can run this stuff all day long, as long as the environments are built correctly, and they can test and go through, and they're following change management. You're managing the risks because you're using automated checking, right? There's no rule that says you have to physically go check something or another person has to for everything. That's something that is made up. Any questions on that? I like that picture? All right. I don't know why I'm holding on to this thing. I think it's, yeah. What's up, man? Yeah, I have. Believe it or not. It's kind of like a unicorn, but I have seen it. Like, would I say it's as elegant as the picture? No, because the biggest challenge is in the dynamic app testing, um, and baselines for automation. So when you're doing the testing, making sure you have the right test environments built, and as the app starts to add more features, you have to continue to add to that piece. So that's where the challenge is, right? But at least you're not talking to developers about their MacBooks or something stupid. You're talking to them about good code, right? And they are more paranoid than we are. So if we can help the developers be less paranoid, be in their own little space, hanging out in their hoodie, in their mom's basement, dark lights, let's let them do that. But yeah, I would say that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is privacy by design, but if you can be there on the front end as a guiding light to help them understand what they need to think about, it's great. Like, I remember I got a question from a development team, and they're like, is there a reason why I can't just put your password's wrong or your username is wrong? Why do I have to say it's one of these two? And it's explaining to them, well, if you got the password, helping them understand, like, we don't want to give too much away. Here's why it's set up that way. Like, that's where you can play a role. That's a good question, though. Anything else? Does that help? Um. All right. Yeah, I'm going through my list here of things. Yeah, but I have seen it actually work for real. It's the biggest challenge is getting. And here's what I would tell you when you're trying to put this in: trying to get a 10% functional system is better than no function. So you have to continue to take the 10% wins and continue to improve on it on a regular basis. Usually more at the smaller organization because we're able to start it right. Sometimes it's harder when you come into the big organization and they're going from like a waterfall methodology where they have releases to a DevOps model. And it's the challenge when you go with the small organization, though, is that they're usually doing Lord of the Flies, just doing whatever they want and calling it DevOps, which is the other negative side, right? You have to explain to them like that's not what DevOps actually is. You can't just do what you want, right? But yeah, I've seen it. It's just it usually takes very strong dev leadership that understands what's going on to get it pushed down and force people to actually do it. It's not going to be security. It's going to be your dev leadership. But yeah, change management doesn't mean change meeting. And we want to record the evidence. So from a compliance and security standpoint, we want to check to make sure they're doing the right stuff. We want to automate those tests, right? So static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, continuous pen testing, things like that. Unit, user, code, all those different tests you can do it. The other piece too that I think people do screw up when they start doing this automated testing is a lot of the tools will hold 60, 90 days of logs. But for a security program, you generally need 6 months to a year of logs. So making sure as you're putting this stuff in that you're actually logging stuff for the proper duration. If you're going for a SOC 2 Type 2 and you're in your second year, they're going to go for a whole year of monitoring. So you need to have a year of evidence. So you got to make sure that you're thinking through that as you're putting in some of the automation. Nick, stop new stupid. Yeah. So, and this is the piece where like you really do get ahead of things. Having them understand on the front end what's going on, privacy by design, security by design, that's a big piece. So you're trying to prevent net new stupid. You can't fix the past, but we're trying to stop future stupid problems from occurring. What are these benefits? There you go. Plus, we got a cat on a unicorn. It wouldn't be a proper security conference without a cat meme. Let's be honest. There we go. At least somebody's laughing. Like, come on. Like, you guys are like the frozen chosen. All right. And evidence, right? Hey, same thing. Make sure you collect that evidence. But if you have the log stuff, you shouldn't have to go to them. That's where the GRC tools do play a role. Getting those connectors, having them plug into your SIM so you don't have to bother people. And then again, change management. And if you're on the IT side, you still don't have to. I was at a company where we had to do 2 change meetings. It is a 2 review change process. It was awful. And 75% of the things we discussed did not need to be discussed. So what you can do is you can have set up where like, hey, the change goes out, goes into Slack, whatever. People have 3 days to respond. And essentially, if someone wants to have a meeting, you can. But this way you're not having meetings unless they're actually needed. It'll help speed up that process too on the IT side, especially when you have more stakeholders involved and you need a little bit different buy-in than maybe a DevOps model, something like that, where you're making organizational changes. You're rolling out mobile device management or some other terrible tool that's going to lock out your executive team. Things like that. All right, other tips and tricks. So doing operational management, looking at business initiatives, IT governance meetings. I don't know. I don't know how much they actually help, but if I know what the business is doing, I can be far more aligned with what's going on. Doc procedures. Draw a treasure map. Words are hard. No one knows how to read anymore. All right? So draw a Candyland map or your favorite Chutes and Ladders map and have them figure out how to get to the little treasure, and they can follow the picture. It's way easier. All right? Screenshots in a wiki. I have slapped a GoPro to an engineer's head before. I have no problem doing that. The other alternative is have them turn on Zoom and press record. You need to make work instructions or some kind of documented procedure, just make a video library. Everyone watches YouTube. Make your own internal YouTube library. There's no rule that says it all has to be written in some Word document. You can do it in a PowerPoint. I don't care, but make it easy for yourself. All right? What you got? Yes. That's not true anymore. So you turn on that AI thing in Zoom, boom. What you got? Yeah, you like that now. It'd be a lot faster, right? Because the other part too is you want people to be able to update stuff. Because when the stuff does hit the fan, you need to be able to look at it, figure out what you're supposed to be doing, or somebody's out. So if you just turn on Zoom, turn on the AI helper or whatever, you're going to have the searchable text, right? And you're going to have it's way faster to update. Because I mean, dude, I don't know if you guys. I mean, I've been in Microsoft where they change where the button is while I'm in there. Like, I think it's here, and then now it's over in the security and compliance. Now it's in compliance. Now it's over here. I don't know. Like, trying to find it. The other part too, there's all this don't click this training. I like make your own adventure. I think that's more fun than static tabletop stuff like that. Uh, helping the organization understand if we don't do our backup tests, this is what might happen. And like if you've done your backup test, you can pick A. If you can't, pick B. If you want to see an example, I can show you guys later. Running a GRC tool, I think that's a better thing. Manual pen test, automated pen test. There's nothing wrong with doing automated pen testing. A lot of network tests and a lot of pen testers, on the back end, they just have a bunch of scripts they're running. There is a part where there is a manual test where that's a very important of exploitability of like how do we put this all together. But until you're actually ready for it, maybe you spend your money elsewhere in the beginning. And then controls based on the prescribed risk. So I was obviously U.S. military. We had secret, and then we have top secret, and there's rules for secret information, and there's rules for top secret information. Writing your program and implementing your program where you're using those rules so they're appropriate. So that way you're not trying to guard things that don't matter. A few more thoughts. I don't know if anyone will even get these jokes. Does anyone get this? You might sock too. Oh, this might be wasted on this audience. I don't know. In search of a life. Come on, ISO. Like, man, rough crowd. But the other part, though, because I know this guy speaks Klingon. Being an expert in any of these standards, that's great. Your business doesn't care. But you do need to be able to talk about market, opportunities, things like that. They want to sell to the U.S. government. Okay, we got to talk about FedRAMP. We got to talk about NIST. You want to sell a European market. We got to talk GDPR. But you got to be able to help the business grow, right? And angry rant. Don't buy any more tools unless you have service or a headcount to support it, or just buying more tools because it's cool. If you want minimum viable compliance, just buy a dumb tool and use their audit partner. You'll get past. And when companies are trying to put in a process, any process is better than no process in Lord of the Flies. So it's fun to chase people around. And there you go. In summary, let's break that governance model. Let's not try to control everything ourselves. Let's try to push that down. Let's use BSOs. Let them be a champion, stuff like that. And in closing, I do have a podcast. I would love to have any of you on it. You're welcome to sign up. It's a 10-minute podcast. You just tell me a cool story about something that actually worked, not just stuff that failed. Because I've got plenty of stories out there that didn't work. I want to hear stories that actually succeeded. It's a chance for you to get yourself your own little LinkedIn 10-minute commercial about how awesome you are. And we get to spread some love about from the security standpoint of like good things. Because let's be honest, I don't think anyone sent this guy an email saying thanks for having email work all day. Have you gotten a text message saying, hey, I didn't get ransomware today. I really appreciate it. No, probably not. So this is our opportunity. I don't know. I will have to go talk to my people as soon as this is over. Thank you. It should be secure. All right. Any other questions? What we got here? Any recommendations for continuous software dependency known? Well, that's a lot of words. For continuous software dependency. So you're talking about like SonarQube, or not SonarQube, but Tenable Nessus, like that type of vulnerability, or are you talking like code CI pipeline? I guess would be the question. So if you're talking bigger picture, I'm a big fan of Tenable Nessus, the cloud version, because they actually will allow you to reclassify things, and only for a certain period of time, so you can actually document what you're doing, and also move things up, because sometimes two mediums equal a high. Otherwise, Vericode's the best, but Vericode is very, very in depth, and if it doesn't work with your pipeline, it may not be the best tool. So in our KubeWorks, there's plenty of them out there. I'm sure they've got all sorts of cool names these days. Any other questions? Is that it? Sweet. Anything else from the audience? All right. Thank you all for your time.